Name: Ethan Parker. Age: 20 years old, a college student. Before everything changed, Ethan was just an ordinary guy, passionate about video games and blogging. He wasn't popular in high school, but he had his friends and good relationships with his family. Ethan had always been a quiet guy. In school, he was often called a nerd for his love of games and science fiction. He wasn't popular, but he wasn't an outcast either. His life was pretty simple. He studied, hung out with a few close friends, and spent evenings playing video games or writing blogs about his experiences. Everything was fine, and Ethan was happy. His world was limited to his personal interests, and he didn't want anything more. When Ethan turned 18, he decided to try streaming on Twitch, playing his favorite games and interacting with his audience. He didn't expect a large following, but it was a way to share his passions with others. Slowly, his audience began to grow. At first, the followers weren't many, but there were people who supported him and praised his sincerity. Soon, though, came the haters. At first, Ethan didn't pay much attention to simple comments like, "You're too slow for this game," or "Why aren't you better at it?" He saw them as ordinary criticism that all streamers face. But over time, the bullying became more aggressive. One day, in the comments under his stream, a user named GameKing89 started writing nasty things about Ethan's appearance. "Your glasses are ridiculous, you look like a total idiot." At first, Ethan tried to ignore it, but GameKing89 wouldn't stop and started threatening to find him in real life. Ethan didn't know what to do, but his friends on the stream became concerned. They told him not to pay attention to people trying to provoke him. He tried to follow their advice, but every new comment felt worse than the last. As the days went on, the toxic comments increased. Someone began making memes of his photos, and these memes became more and more insulting. Soon, fake accounts appeared, spreading rumors. Ethan was accused of faking his streams, of being a scammer just to get more followers. That was far from the truth, but the attacks didn't stop. Ethan could no longer look at his page without feeling dread. When he opened it, he was met with not supportive messages, but another wave of hate. He began to feel like his entire world was falling apart. He didn't want to go online anymore, but at the same time it was his only place where he felt somewhat alive. In the digital world, he could be anyone, but in real life, he was often trapped by stereotypes and expectations. He decided to keep streaming, but each time it became harder to do so. What once brought him joy, leveling up characters and interacting with his audience, had now become a heavy burden. One evening, when he turned on his stream just to relax, a new wave of comments flooded his screen. "You're a disgrace, you're nothing, you're fooling yourself if you think anyone likes you." He felt his world crumble. Everything he had once loved was now a source of pain. Ethan hadn't been online for a week. He turned off all notifications, deleted his accounts, and stopped responding to messages. He hadn't left the house and was avoiding his friends. He began to isolate himself more and more. Ethan felt helpless. He was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and the fear of interacting with anyone made him withdraw even further. Every now and then he tried to get back on his account, but each time seeing more insults made him feel even worse. It was a vicious cycle. He couldn't walk away from his online life, but he also couldn't bear the pain it brought him. He started suffering from insomnia and then from anxiety. His heart raced every time he tried to go outside. He felt like his life had lost all meaning. He couldn't understand why this was happening to him. He hadn't done anything wrong, but society, through the voices of anonymous online aggressors, had decided to destroy his reputation. One night, lying in the dark, Ethan couldn't stop the thoughts. What if they're right? What if I really am worthless? Why does everyone hate me? He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but the nightmares never left him. The next morning, when Ethan still couldn't get out of bed, his mother, Jennifer, knocked on his door. She noticed his withdrawal and insisted on talking. Ethan couldn't hide his pain any longer. He told her about how hard it was to deal with the bullying and how it was affecting his mental state. He was afraid she wouldn't understand, that she would think this was just internet drama, but she listened silently and didn't interrupt him. At one point, she said, "You're not alone. You need to talk to a professional." Ethan initially refused. He thought therapy was for people with real problems. But his mother insisted, and finally he agreed. This was his first real decision to break out of the cycle. At the first therapy session, Ethan felt extremely vulnerable. He spoke about his fears and struggles, but every time he tried to open up, new wounds resurfaced. He began to doubt whether he should even share such personal feelings. But the therapist, Laura, helped him see things from a different perspective. She explained that while cyberbullying and online harassment could deeply affect one's mental health, it didn't define his self-worth. Ethan found it hard to accept this, but after several weeks of working with Laura, he started to realize that his worth was not determined by what others said. After therapy, Ethan began to feel his life changing. He started going outside again, talking to friends, and no longer fearing the online world. He decided to regain his confidence, beginning with finding support. A few months later, he came across an online group where people shared their stories of cyberbullying and supported each other. He became a part of this group and found many people who had gone through similar experiences. They shared their stories, talked about their fears, but most importantly, they looked for ways to help each other. This was a revelation for Ethan. He realized he wasn't alone. One of the most memorable people he met in the group was Lily, a girl who had also been a victim of online aggression. She suggested that Ethan help create a resource for those suffering from cyberbullying. Together, they began planning a website where people could share their stories, receive advice from therapists, and find support. With each passing day, Ethan grew more confident. He didn't just return to streaming, he began sharing his struggles with his audience. His streams became a place where people could discuss not only games but also difficult life moments. Ethan no longer feared criticism. He understood that, despite the toughest moments, he still had control over his life and his reactions to it. He continued working with Lily and others on the platform aimed at helping those who suffer from cyberbullying. His audience grew, but now Ethan didn't measure its success by the number of people but by how meaningful and supportive the relationships within it were. Ethan became an activist, raising awareness about cyberbullying. He used his story to help others and show that, despite the darkest times, recovery is possible. He continued working with Lily on educational programs and became an important figure in the fight against online aggression.